us a little bit about that, about your own upbringing and how you were raised and how that influenced you.
Oh man, Terrell, Texas, man. Population 12,248, well, 247 now that I'm out here. 28 miles east of Dallas, Texas. The trucks that drive up and down the street, even the horn is Southern. I mean, it's a slice of American life. Uh, I wouldn't trade my upbringing for the world. Sort of the community aspect of Terrell, Texas. Everybody knew everybody. It was a few families on both sides of the track that make up the town. So it was an interesting dynamic growing up. No matter where you were, there was a father or a mother that would make sure you were either to get home when you're supposed to get home or make sure you're doing the right thing. So I appreciated that. And the other side of it was my grandmother and grandfather who were well known and respected throughout the whole city. Now, my grandfather was a yard man, and my grandmother was a maid. But also, my grandmother had a nursery school, ABC Nursery School, that she had for 35 years. Young, when she was coming up, young Black woman with her own business. Now, that nursery school, during the school years, of course, was the ages, I believe, 1 to 5, right? But during the summer, she would leave the doors open, and if people had to bring the kids over, they would do that. So that my house became like a hub, and so she basically raised the city, in a sense, on both sides of the track. And for those of you who are maybe listening in the UK or may not familiar with what I'm saying, and the railroad tracks in southern cities, usually the railroad tracks split the city in half. On one side, particularly in Terrell, Texas, it was the white side, and on the other side was black side of town. That's how we called it, so it was the north and the south. But so when I say that, I'm letting you know that my grandmother was able to, in a sense, bridge certain gaps, racial gaps in my city. Who, Terrell was, it was a little late to the party in some things as far as racial things. But like I said, it was just a great place to be. And my grandmother was so special in raising everybody. I remember there was a situation where we were having a debate about closing off the streets to our side of town, and there was a petition going around, and my grandmother didn't want me to be part of the petition. I'm like, well, Granny, this is time for us as Black people to stand up and da-da-da. She was just shut up with all that. And I was like, Granny, but this is a big issue, the closing off the streets of the Black side of town. Boy, like I said, now be quiet. And people came with their signs and in the yard. She said, get on out of here with all that. So I'm thinking, man, is Granny working on the other side? What's going on? But then my grandmother quietly got in her Nova, drove on the other side of the tracks, and spoke to the mayor because she had raised the mayor, whispered in his ear what not to do. And the situation was solved. So I'm giving you perspective. I'm giving you what my grandmother was not knowingly passing on to me on how to bridge gaps, how to take situations and make it turn out right. Do it with a little bit of oomph, because my grandmother wasn't to be played with, but with a whole lot of love and compassion and foresight. So without getting too far down the road with it, that's where I came from. And not only that, and then just being the quarterback of the high school, in Texas, everything's about football, baby. Ain't no racism on Friday night now, because we're playing football, baby. So to be the quarterback of the team was great, because our whole city, if you ever wanted to rob Terrell, if you ever want to steal something from house, go there at 8:00 Friday night, because we ain't at the house. But it was an interesting dynamic because I was a quarterback in high school, and at one point I wasn't doing so well. And I remember getting booed in one particular game. It's nothing like getting booed by the pastor of your church when you're playing bad on a Friday, and then I have to go play the piano for that church on Sunday, and he puts it into his sermon. So it was a great place to grow up, and there it is.
That's great. I actually have one more question about Granny, and actually something you just said then, thinking about her as an independent businesswoman,
Yeah.
a young Black businesswoman, is very striking to think about. But there's one story you tell in the book about her open-mindedness
Yeah.
and her willingness to speak out.
Yeah.
And it's a story of when you were in church.
Mm, mm.
The reverend was
Yeah.
giving a homophobic sermon.
Well, listen, if you listen, in 1976, we were still trying to figure, and here's what I love about America. I love the evolution of freedom. I know that America gets a lot of things wrong early on, and though that evolution happens, it may not come as fast as we want. I mean, obviously, you look at the history of America with with racism and things, but now Black president, I mean, the evolution. So we were trying to evolve. At least my grandmother was pushing for us to evolve. In 1976, I was 10 years old. And the preacher started preaching, God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Understand? Amen. And everybody said, amen. My grandmother stood up and said, you stop that. The whole church was like, what? I said, you stop that. And the preacher's caught off guard. Miss Tally, now mind you, she raised him too. She said, you stop that. Now, I want to frame this in 1976 when my grandmother said it. She says, God makes sissies too, and you stop that. And I didn't really understand what it was at that time, being 10 years old. But as I got older, I asked my grandmother, what did you mean by that? She said, listen, this is what I mean. I had this nursery school for 30 plus years. I would watch little boys play with army men, and some of those little boys would play with dolls. The one that played with dolls, they had no one to talk to, so they came to me. So having this knowledge, when the preacher got up and started preaching this way, he was driving a spike further into the problem with these young men and women coming out trying to be themselves. So I told that preacher, I want you to open the umbrella of religion, open the umbrella of that we can all stand under what you call is Christianity and being Christ-like. She said, because God didn't make mistakes. Everybody that is here on earth is supposed to be here. So we have to respect that. So that's my grandmother in 1976 giving me perspective so that when I got open and went out into the world, that I would understand that everybody that I see, they're supposed to be here and we got to respect it. And so I appreciate where we're headed now in the world and allowing everyone to stand under freedom and things like that. Now, it's going to take some time, but Estelle Marie Talley was a trailblazer in that sense. And no one was going to mess with her. Now, I don't know if you guys have seen Tyler Perry, Madea, but my grandmother was the first Madea. She was like, man, anybody want this, they can come get it, So it was a treat to see that.